All right, ladies and gentlemen, Thursday again. Are you in front of your computer or are you outside having some good weather? I hope both, because you can work from anywhere now, right? Today, we bring back a great guest to the show, Mr. Charlie Tomeo, longtime channel guru. I don't even want to say the word veteran because I don't think that's even a fair title. I mean, the guy's done it everywhere he's been. So I'm going to just call him channel guru, who is at Axcient right now. How you doing, Charlie?
Good to see you, George. I know you usually call me old guy, but
Ah, no, I don't.
we'll take
Yeah,
we'll take veteran
I mean,
or
age is just a number, my friend.
that's it.
Age is
Good to
just a
see
number.
you.
No, good to see you too. I know we keep on saying we should catch up with each other since you're right over the bridge over here in New Jersey, and I'm in over here in Pennsylvania. So once we can do that, we should definitely do that.
Well, especially with you, you're in lockdown, so
Yeah,
we'll
yeah,
have to wait a bit.
yeah. Well, I think I can sneak away on a car,
All right.
uh, but a little car trip for the day. But if I got to get on a plane, I think Mrs. George will come after me.
Yeah, maybe
So,
may come after me too. So
well,
if I'm the one dragging you there,
I'll try and keep you out of it so that way, there's only one casualty, right? Anyway, so just getting this out on all of the various links here so that the world can hear our topic today. And our topic today is emerging technologies and how to handle them, right?
yeah.
So here we go. All right, we're out everywhere we're supposed to be, so that's fantastic. Now, let's talk about emerging technologies for a minute because it's a constant pipeline, right? I mean, let's zoom out for a second and say that the technology industry is huge, right? It's like saying, hey, I'm in IT, right? Well, there's 12 different divisions of IT if you read the textbooks, right? So, or I'm in marketing. What does that mean? Are you, in digital, or are you in event marketing, or are you in whatever, right? It's just a big term, right?
That's
But
right.
technology as a thought, right? Like I think there's even Moore's law, right? Things double up every 12 to 16 to 18 months, right? I mean, that doesn't just apply to processors and memory and motherboards. It applies to software and ecosystems and platforms, right? And I'm going to tell you, as an MSP, it's hard to keep up with it, Charlie. It is.
Especially now. I mean, the last few years, I mean, MSPs have been kind of, certainly the hot market, right? And they've also been, if you look at from a security standpoint, they've been a target, right, for the bad guys. So it almost seems like every time you turn around, there's, kind of another vendor popping up trying to solve for, either a specific problem or in some cases a more broader problem.
Yeah.
So I think I mean, for me, I think it's great. I've been doing this a long time, and certainly, you and I had talked about this where, there's always these buzzwords that are out there, right? I mean, ransomware has been around for years now, and what that looked like and how people were going to solve that. The one that always comes to mind to me is, BYOD, right? Bring your own device, and the different technologies that popped up there. I think, there was a bunch of MDM providers that popped up, and so for me, it's that constant cycle. But it is interesting to see a lot of vendors that have decided to focus on this space.
Oh, 100%. And let's be straight. I was just reading an article this morning on the feed that any home-based router that's older than now 2.5 years, they're saying, that hasn't been updated, have critical flaws. Any router older than that can't get updated is pretty much just wide open. It's not even protecting those people, according to the talking heads out there. That's millions and hundreds of millions of devices, right? I know people who, instead of getting the cable company's device or the FiOS's or the AT&T's or the Time Warners, they just bought one, right? Because it was cheaper, right? $50 off the shelf. And then that's been the unit that they've been running on for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Not anymore. So that kind of circles back to our topic of, kind of emerging technologies, and it's always coming, right? It's always coming down the pipe. The question is, do you have enough time to stay on top of it? Do you have enough time to understand how that changes your business? Do you have enough time to understand, if there's an imminent situation like a 0 day where you have to react or else you're not protecting your customer? There's a lot of facets to that. And I'm going to go, and we're going to go into more, formal chat, but as an MSP, I used to go to conferences to learn about these, right? You keep up, right? I mean, obviously there's blogs and RSS feeds and all that other stuff, but like, I want to understand what's actually happening on the ground, right? Not what's coming down from the magazine provider. And I used to go to conferences for that stuff, just to kind of, at least once a quarter almost, I was going out just to keep up with what's actually being done, right? What's the average MSP IT guy recommending, doing, seeing? Yeah, but that's not what's been happening for the last year and a half, right? So like, you've kind of been left to your own research to figure out what's coming on. If nothing else, just to understand, hey, should I be doing something, right? I think it's a constant challenge that if you left unchecked, I mean, you could quickly fall by the wayside, right?
No, absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you. Even from the vendor side, uh, you know, I know we certainly, anytime we go to these conferences, the 5 or 10 minutes you had as a break, you'd walk around the show floor just to see who you didn't recognize, right? Who's new? What are they doing? Where do they fit? And that is the one thing that I think is fairly unique about the and I think the MSPs kind of drove this a bit, was that you have these companies that pop up that are solving a specific problem, whereas in the past, like you said, I've been doing this a while. If you look at the enterprise or even the mid market, they would still count on the big vendors they had relationships with, to
100%.
bring to market a solution.
Yep.
And surprisingly, I mean, as George, they'd wait and wait and wait. They'd wait. Well, next year they're gonna do it. And now, I think it's a pretty neat approach certainly from the MSP side, where they're saying, hey, if somebody's got a solution for it now and they're good, they don't have to be part of one of the big guys, or they don't have to be part of the other, 10 vendors I work with. I'll go take a look at them.
There's I mean, let me put it in perspective, and tell me if you disagree. From 2010 to 2015, the average number of tools, apps, vendors, SaaS subscriptions, whatever, per customer was between 25 and 40. Now in 2021, I believe that number is closer to 65. Do you disagree?
No, I think you're probably spot on. I mean, if you look at even when I first started focusing on the MSP space, security was really endpoint protection or antivirus. That was your security. And now I meet with these MSPs now where, I'd say, it doesn't matter what they necessarily want to call themselves, but, they've become more, or MSSP or at least, hybrid, where they're really knowledgeable about what's going on. And, a lot of it has to do with the communities themselves and sharing knowledge, but it also has to do with the fact that there's a bunch of vendors with that are bringing new things to light, and they're educating them.
I think, and we're going to go through this in a second, but I think that because technology is coming up, I call it upstream, right? Like somebody like an MSP is like, I really had this challenge. I didn't find a good answer. I built one, and then they kind of like graduated upstream into vendor land. Or I call it downstream, right? Enterprise, square. I almost call it square peg round hole, because it's like, hey, this was designed for Fortune 100, Fortune 500, but hey, you want to sell, this really expensive solution down to your sub 100, or 150 or 200 person employee company. Yeah, maybe that could work. And then there's also sideways, right? Like vendors that you're consistently switching around, right? Because maybe somebody come up with an extra feature, or maybe you found a better price or whatever, right? When you look at that circle, there's a business component that's missing from the ooh ah factor though. Because like you could literally be switching out and adding technology all day long, all month long, all year long. Then at some point, like you actually need to run a company. And that's kind of the lead into what we're actually talking about today, which is, hey, we can talk about all the different trends about what's hot, what's not. And we talk about that often. But as an MSP, what's your process? Have you actually figured out the blueprint to evaluation, testing, figuring out the pricing scheme to see if it even makes sense from a business practicality purpose, and then rolling it into your customer agreements, right? Like that process never stops because the technology is always coming, right? Like this year, the UK is going to allow self-driving cars. This year, 2020, 21.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been hearing about it forever, but now a country is now signed off saying that this is going to be okay. First time I saw about how self-driving car was Knight Rider.
That's right.
I mean, everybody wanted that car. I talked to you, it drove. I mean, it was a machine on wheels. I don't know. Would you rather take a Tesla or Kit?
Well, I think, based on my age, the answer to that. I mean, you definitely would take Kit, right? All day, every day.
I agree. I would take Kit too. I think the Tesla's great until, the power runs out. But Kit had that really cool fuel that he could run on forever. Anyway, so little nostalgia there. So anyway, let's get into what we're actually covering today. But we have actually already talked about it, right? Emerging technologies. What are they? What's hot? What's going on? Well, Charlie already said security. I don't think anyone who's watching this will disagree. It's coming out of every orifice. It's coming out of every mailbox. It's coming out of every street. There's security vendors popping up by the day. Actually, Huntress, who plays in our sandbox in MSP land, just announced a $40 million round B today. Congratulations to our friends over there.
Yeah, that's great.
There's a lot of money coming down that pipe for security. Not just them, a lot of companies, right? So security is one. AI is probably another one that's starting to pop up, and you're starting to see that with a lot of automated chats and bots and machine learning and all this other stuff that's now being fed into the tools that we're using today. So I think that's cool. Business kind of intelligence or BI analytics, right? I think that's another emerging technology that's really hot. And then at the consumer level, I mean, we call it IoT, Charlie, right? Internet of Things. But like, I heard somebody had a Wi-Fi enabled toaster the other day, and I'm like, why? What do you need to get a buzz on your phone?
It's funny that you say that, because after 15 years, the washing machine went, and we wound up getting a new one, and it's got its own app, and there's all these crazy things that it could do. And so I have to dig into that. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm like, you hit a couple of buttons and you move on. But apparently, I guess it'll alert me when
like I can get it for the wash, right?
And
because the wash could take an hour, but like the toaster is like minutes, right? Like a minute, two. Where do you need an app notification to let you know the toast is out? I don't get it.
Yeah, it's
what?
And the challenge with those things always has been, and it's always been a concern of mine being on the cybersecurity side, is that just because you are a company that works on those type of that technology doesn't mean you're necessarily a technology or a cybersecurity company, right? We saw that a couple of years ago where there was a hack within a doll where people were actually able to hack in and talk to your kids with the doll that they had sitting in their bedroom at night, right? So it's it's one of those things that we're seeing it become better, but you're going to get to the point where most of these companies, regardless of what products they bring to market, are going to be really technology companies first. And I think you saw that with Tesla, right? They were able to do something that the car manufacturers struggled to do, which is they built a car around the computer, right? They didn't go from the car and then try to retrofit it.
I argue that, to your point, and I agree with you, like the sports drinks manufacturers are now coming out with arm and wristbands to monitor your saturation of water in your system and your sweating and whatever. You got the people who are creating these sleep monitors now that are trying to tie it into your food. Like all of a sudden, like your cereal box is going to be an IT thing. Like it's got like,
Right.
what was it? Was it Minority Report back with Tom Cruise where the cereal box was like a moving hologram, right? Like
Yes. Yeah.
came to life. Like that's not that far away.
Now there's a lot of things that I'm seeing now that you'd never thought we'd see, right? So it definitely it is moving quickly.
I don't know how people are going to feel about their retina scan as they're walking down the sidewalk, and then all of a sudden an ad pops out from a storefront, customized to them. I'm wondering if that's going to be a little bit of a privacy invasion. But I mean, is there still privacy online now these days? I don't know. I don't think so.
No, exactly.
Which is why I don't want my toaster oven being tracked. I don't want them to know how much toast I'm eating.
Exactly.
But anyway, yeah. So categories for emerging tech. I mean, there's 100 categories, right? These three are obviously the ones that make a lot of sense. But to MSPs, right, you almost need to start watching. I really never paid attention to, Charlie, to like CES or any of these kind of conferences where the home technology stuff got released. Like South by Southwest was one of those, and it kind of morphed into a bunch of other things. You almost need to now, right? Because everybody is working from home a lot, and you almost need to make sure that you're not surprised by certain things. Like the doll from China, that's never going to stop, and that's a little bit scary, right? Because you have no idea what's in there. But all these other tech things could start to conflict with the work stuff, right?
Yeah, we would, I talked to some of our advisory board last week, and we were specifically talking about kind of, last year, right, when, everything went sideways, and then today where things are. And, I think the MSP community moved very quick to make sure that their customers were, up and running. They weren't, there was no interruption, but there was some concessions that they had to make to do that, right? So now they may have allowed somebody to use a family laptop or desktop to get involved. And, we all know there's a lot more risk there.
Well, I got one for you. Chromebooks have had a 730% increase in sales since January of this year till now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. So, and then you add that to supply chain issues that we had. So even if you standardized on a specific laptop, you may not be able to get it anymore.
Yeah.
So you may had to have bought a Chromebook just as a kind of Band-Aid approach. So I think that they're doing a great job of making sure that they're able to support whatever life cycle their customer base is in, whether it's, that, like you said, start off with the working from anywhere. And that may be a permanent thing. It may be temporary, and they're working through it, but making sure that they have all these different use cases covered, and that ultimately they're providing the same service from an SLA standpoint, but also that security factor, because, they know that their end customers are looking to make sure that they're protected.
100%. No, to your point, the supply chain thing, and I'm going to separate that, right? Not supply chain attack. That's a different terminology, but we know what that means. We're actually talking about you can't get the Dells and the Lenovos and the HPs. And like all of a sudden you're putting in orders in May and they're saying, oh, well, they might be there by August 31st. And you're like, August 31st? Like cancel that order. I'll find something else.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Which let's face it, what's happening. People are now being forced onto consumer grade models from the same manufacturers because they're available, because the business models just aren't here, right? So that's a concern, right? A little bit, especially I think Dell just announced a little issue there, or somebody announced it for them. Yeah. So it's definitely a constantly moving target. But as MSPs, all this technology is coming downstream. If you don't have enough time to keep up with it, then what do you do, right? I don't think that's an option. I think you have to spend some time keeping up with what's happening, reading the places online where, you're at least getting consistent news. If you're not now going to restart going out to the events to actually talk to people in the business and say, hey, what's up? What's happening? What are you seeing? What are you adding? What are you coming across? This is the stuff that's real, right? Like the marketing is part of the problem, which this slide is perfectly stated. Getting past the marketing. Marketing people are great. I love marketing people, but let's face it, the message that you get from the marketing ad and department may not always fit real life, right? Like what you bought on, the thing that you convinced you to talk to someone or press buy, in the end may have not been exactly what they said it was. And so there's an evaluation that needs to happen. And you can't just do it. I'll tell you what's happening, Charlie. Ready? Hey, Mr. MSP that's managing my company. I'm looking into this new thing, right? I need a new e-sign solution, or I need a new new whatever, right? CRM system. What do you have for me? And at that point in time, that MSP who's probably got nothing was like, you know what? I might have something for you. Give me a few days. Let me get back to you. And in that 2 or 3 days, they're frantically trying 1,000 different clicks and 1,000 different websites and 1,000 different solutions. And they're really not getting past surface level in that short period of time because they're on the clock, right? Tell me I'm wrong.
No, I think that's right. And I think, where we're at today, and I would certainly say from an overall, security posture, is you have to be testing this stuff constantly, looking at, at least keeping up to speed. Like you said, it's a little bit more challenging now because in some cases you may have to go find it. But don't just sit there doing a paper eval when you're putting something that's mission critical in place. And like, you use, CRM, for example. I think that's definitely a good one, but the other thing is, really understanding what the use cases that you're trying to solve for. Because as I mean, we use Salesforce, we love it, but is that for everybody? Would you
No.
go implement Salesforce at the local construction company with 10 computers?
No,
Probably not.
I'm sure, I mean, listen, every company is different, but I know companies have to hire Salesforce administrators just to get it to the point where it works for their company. And those people start at like 150. So
Yeah.
like for the small business, like I know they have the small business like variants of this, like Lightning and all this other stuff that they put out there, but it's by no means as easy as click and go. And I think part of the problem is that, nobody wants to say no, right? I think no is like, for some reason, this faux pas. Never say no. No, you should say no if you're not ready for it. It's okay. I'd rather you say no instead of saying yes, fast tracking something and botching it. In both, if you go down both roads, it could all lead to the same place, right? You say yes, you kind of faked it till you maked it, and then all of a sudden it went horribly bad. Or you said, no, sorry, I don't have a solution for you. Then somebody else said, oh yeah, I got a solution. And somehow you got pushed out of the conversation, right? So like those two roads can meet somewhere down line, but it's important to, one, constantly be evaluating technologies and understanding what it is that's out there and available, so that when somebody says, hey, do you know anything, at least you had something kind of filed away in your brain saying, oh yeah, I ran across something, let me go back and pull my notes up. That sounds good, because it sounds like you've constantly been researching on behalf of your customer, waiting for that opportunity so that you're prepared to talk about it, versus, oh yeah, I got something for you, let me get back to you, right? That's a little bit different. It's a little bit just a fine new change there, but if you're trying to find stuff on the fly, it could be dangerous.
I agree with you. I mean, that's something that, I see MSPs do, somebody that a bit more established, right? It's the old, not all business is good business, right? I think we know that, not just from the MSP side, from the vendor side. And then for us, we try to make sure that our sales team, doesn't need an SE or, somebody technical to demo our product, right? When you're talking to, whether it's on the MSP side, George, when it's somebody on your team,
yeah,
if they don't have working knowledge of the solution already, the person on the other end of the phone is going to maybe pause a bit because they're like, okay, well, this person's there. They know it. They've been trained on it. They can't even give me a 5-minute demo. This may be too hard for me and my team, right? It may be heavy lift.
It comes back to, do you have a blueprint in place? Like somebody, like I would think if you're in the technology business, part of the reason that you're in there is that it's exciting. It's like a toy store. Every day there's something new. That's great. That's cool. But now you need to filter that out and say, hey, does that new thing apply to what we're doing, right? What I'm doing. And so it's cool to have that, everybody just paying attention. I'm sure we all are, right? The next iPhone, the next PlayStation, the next VR set, the next camera from Nest, whatever. We're all looking at that at some level, maybe some closer than others. But as a business, what is your blueprint, right? Do you evaluate things quarterly, annually, biannually, monthly, weekly? Who's responsible for testing it? Who's responsible for understanding the business application and the costs and the terms and how this applies to your customer? That needs to be part of your process, right? On a regular basis, or else you're going to be that guy that I just mentioned that's doing it as it comes up, kind of like running around with your chicken with your head cut off, and you're going to miss something. And that something is going to ultimately, even if you're good, right? You're good at figuring it out and getting through it on the fly, it's still going to have time burn, right? So like,
Yeah.
instead of having this time sprawl that's endless, that you can't get control over and that has a cost, if you have a regular process and a timeline and a schedule built into your business flow, you can contain your cost and time investment, right, Charlie?
No, I agree with you.
So, I mean, that's important. Looks like we got a hand raised. Go ahead and make sure to submit your any questions if you're on the live Zoom. Make sure you submit any questions or in the chat, and we'll make sure to answer any of those questions as we go along. So you know where those are. I'm sure everybody's done Zoom 1,000 times, but to this point, Charlie, what is your recommendation to MSPs? I'm sure size plays a part in terms of how often they evaluate new technology, but what's your kind of gut feeling on the correct time flow for this?
I think, what you hit on was good, which is just always keeping, kind of at least up to date on your knowledge, what's going on, what's out there, what are the things that, you really need to offer your clients to make sure not only you're just keeping pace, but you're offering the right service. The other thing I think is big is making sure that you understand whatever solution that you're looking at, regardless of if it's the newest, shiniest thing that everyone's talking about, is are you equipped to, either add it to your reference architecture, right? So is it something that is going to be a standard? So it's not going to be an add-on. And if it's going to be a standard, are you absorbing that cost because you're going to be saving money elsewhere, or are you passing that on? And what does that look like? There was a time, and I think it's probably a couple of years ago at this point where I felt like the feedback we got from MSPs was almost every like 6 months, they had to add something else on because and it's probably closer to 3 years ago where the ransomware it was cuckoo. So they were just adding one tool after the next on top of it and going back. And it was, an extra $2 a month here, too much. But, it was getting to be, a bit tough on their end customers, right? Where, they weren't even waiting for the contract to be due up. They were coming back to the table. But I think that's something you can manage as long as you're able to, your messaging is on point and you're giving people enough notice. I think the bigger problem is if this is not part of your reference architecture, you need to make sure you understand how you're going to go and upsell that or cross-sell that within your base. And what do you really think the adoption is going to be? Because I will tell you, if you go and take on and you train your team on a solution that only 10% of your customer base, unless there's a lot of margin and it's a big dollar amount, it's just not going to be worth it. And so,
let me
you're not going to spend a ton of time in it.
Yeah, let me tell a story about this real quick. So going to reference my good friend, Mr. Matt Lee over at, I forget the name of the company now. It's just blanking on me, but everybody knows Matt Lee, big beard, been around for a while. And at their company, and they're large, right? They had 4 or 5 MSPs merged together to create this newer MSP. That's pretty cool. They knew like, hey, we need to start implementing some of these things across the board, like email security or email backup from Office 365 or whatever it is. And so what they did after they went through their evaluation process, brought the vendors in, figured out what felt good, tested it in the lab, and then find out what their price point was, right? They literally sent a message out to all of their customers at once and said, hey, starting this date, we are now going to start adding this new Office 365 backup, for example, product. And I think that's what it was, to your account to cover all of your users. Here's why, right? Microsoft's not backing it up here, and they tell you that here. And unless you tell us no, right? Unless you opt out, this is now going to be implemented, and this is now going to show up on your bill as of this date. And they give them like 90 days, right? Kind of ramping up to that point. And they had like a 96% exception rate. Like, only 4% said, no, I'm not paying for this.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can't do that for everything. But like, that was so universal, and the price was not enough that like somebody was going to add an extra comma or zero to the end of their bill.
No, that's exactly
right. Everybody was like, yeah, that makes sense. And like, they didn't even really have pushback from their customer base. Could you imagine if that was the way things were done and people just accepted that? How cool would that be?
Yeah, I think depending on something like that seemed to me like it makes a lot of sense. It's kind of like we all see this when as a consumer our bills creep up a little bit, right? And and if we're kidding ourselves if we don't think that they do that intentionally, right? If it's under a certain amount, it's kind of like it's an extra few dollars a month. No one really makes that big of a deal unless you're really digging into it. And but I think if they positioned it as here's the risk, here's the reward, that makes sense. And I'd almost guarantee you that the ones that had a problem with the backing up were probably the 4% that didn't take it. And then they called them back, and asked them to retrieve their data. That's always the way it goes.
Yeah. And then they're like, oh yeah, like if you had called us 1 day sooner, maybe you would have been okay. But after 30 days, sorry, Microsoft doesn't have it. There is a lesson to be learned from how the cell phone companies and the cable TV companies and all those guys do stuff, right? They're constantly popping things in front of you saying yes or no. Yes, you want to upgrade your internet? Just press yes on your remote, and all of a sudden it'll, we'll send you a bill. There's something to be said for 2 things, right? Understanding that the technology either fits how much of your customer base. You said this earlier, right? Like that example of Office 365 backup or email security is kind of universal. If you have an Office 365 mailbox, you probably should have it backed up, right? Like, I think that's a pretty good rule of thought. And there's a lot of cool technology out there that does that. Like, we should talk to our friend Charlie over here at Axcient. They have a great solution. But my point is evaluating stuff on a every 6 months, every quarterly basis. During these quarterly and annual reviews, that's the time to say, hey, by the way, coming up, we're starting to see a trend in wire fraud. Some of our customers, the check signers, the CFOs, the financial controllers of some of our customers got spoofed, right? They took the bait and they wired 10, 15, 20, $30,000. You might want to not give them the name because nobody likes their name out there with that. But if that stuff's actually happening, and it does, and it has, hey, I don't want that to happen to you. That's a great conversation. Now I'm not asking them to spend money on something that's maybe never going to happen. No. This actually happened, right? It could have been you. It happened to another customer of ours. And we're really concerned because we don't want you to lose tens of thousands of dollars. The first thing we want to do is put something in place to help protect against this. The second thing we want to do is, hey, what does your insurance policy say if this happens to you?
And that's the big thing, right? Is, you look at, certainly at SMBs, we know, when they get a breach, 65% of them are going out, in the next 6 months. right? So now when you complicate it, if you look at what what they're doing with cyber insurance, right? Which if, you talked about it a few years ago, everyone was kind of like, is anybody even going to buy it? Well, now to make sure that you even, that you're even able to get a payout, you got to notify them first, right? And you have to take a back seat and they have to determine and call the shots, right? Because if you don't, then you may automatically negate your coverage. The other issue that you have as an MSP, because life's not complicated enough with the pandemic and everything else going on, is depending on who's at fault, you could have a problem. It's not as simple as, hey, we're just going to cover it, right? It's, even a few of the MSPs I was talking to was saying that the new, annually they have to, basically fill out all the information all over
It's
again.
like an insurance questionnaire. Yeah.
But it used to be kind of, check, 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 and, get it done in no time. And now it's page upon page, and you actually have to go back and prove this stuff, which in the past, you weren't really doing that. It was almost like a gentleman's agreement. You have this, this, and this. Now they want proof of it. So it's definitely heating up. It's becoming a bit more serious, and that's where I think a lot of the vendors that are popping in this specific topic, right, is looking at new technology. Is a lot of these are around solving for some of the issues that we're seeing.
Well, it comes back to, and listen, I almost feel like it's a beat the dead, don't kick the dead horse type situation. But like, the word trusted advisor has been abused for so long, but it's a legitimate ask, right? Like, your customer's not keeping up the technology. They're doing their business, right? They're running their construction company, they're running their accounting firm, they're running their law firm, whatever it is. They're not paying attention to what's happening. But when it happens to them, oh, you're the first guy they're going to blame, or girl. You're the first person they're going to blame. And they're going to say, well, why didn't I have this in place? You'd be like, oh, well, I tried to sell you about this before, but you didn't want to buy it. Like, that's the worst conversation. It really is. Like,
No, absolutely. And I think that's the challenge with, unfortunately, I think, we talked before about like not, all business is good. Not every customer is the right customer for you. Is, we're seeing some people that, I think initially started with that opt out methodology, right? So we will send the agreement over. We'll basically outline everything that we're going to do, how we're going to do it, why we're going to do it. And if you chose to say not take the, security package, right, or the advanced security package, you just signed off that you've chosen not to do it. And a lot of them aren't doing that anymore because they're still feeling like they may or may not still be liable, even with having that piece of paper, or even if they're not liable, it's not great for their reputation if they're tied to it.
listen, we started this whole thing saying, hey, new things are coming all the time. You can't just wait for it to happen to you. But there are precautions you can take as a business owner, as an MSP, to make sure that you're not putting yourself in a bad position too. To your point, Charlie, on this topic, your MSA, right? Your constitution, as our friend Brad Gross calls it, between you and your customer, it's got to be clear, right? That you don't know everything, and you're not the be all end all. You're doing your best to keep them up to date with the current technology. That's there's words best practice, reasonable, right? Like, even the government's not 100% secure, and they have looks like an unlimited budget, right, in terms of for cybersecurity. Sure. So you should be protecting yourself in your constitution, in your MSA, saying, hey, from time to time, I'm going to recommend things to you for whatever reason, for whatever purpose. And if you you need to have some language in there saying that if you choose not to take it, that's okay, but that you're going to be held harmless if something happens and they opted out of a recommendation, right? You do have
That's right.
set your foundation up to protect yourself from day zero. But then there needs to be that documentation trail, right? Like anybody can, I hate to go negative here, but anybody can sue anybody for anything. Right? It's America.
Yeah,
But if you have your ducks in a row, you can protect yourself even though your customer said, yeah, encryption, I don't need that. Oh, okay,
yeah,
sure,
exactly.
right. You know what I mean? Like I can't, like that conversation happens way too often. And if you're coming back and you're not closing the door to make sure that somebody doesn't sneak up behind you, no, and nobody wants an adversarial relationship with their customer, but that's got to be in your MSA.
No, absolutely. I agree with you.
Yeah. Like, so Charlie, let me ask you this. The MSPs that are constantly adopting, right? The MSPs that are constantly, kind of in the lab testing things. Are you finding that some of them are actually making that a position? Like maybe the larger guys who have like a dedicated person whose whole job is to keep up with whatever new products come in or out of the offering?
Yeah, we're starting to see more and more of that, or if not a specific person, it's a handful of people, and they're kind of splitting time doing it. But it's definitely, you know, George, you and I get enough people reaching out to us on the vendor side, right, trying to sell us new things. The next thing that's going to help our sales teams or our customer success teams. So, you know, the MSPs are, it's got to be just, the phone's ringing off the hook. They're getting a ton of, emails on it. So, I think there's at least, if there's not an individual, there's a team. And then, most of them are putting a process in place that they're able to determine kind of just to separate what's real and what's not real. What do they really should be
Yeah,
focused on
like a
looking at?
committee or a board or whatever you want to call it, like
Yeah, but the challenge you'd have with an individual doing it, and if they love technology, is that they would just be looking at whatever they thought was cool that day, and it may or may not be the best thing for the business. I'm sure. We lost you, George. I can't hear you. Nope, not yet. Now it says you're connecting to audio. It's the longest you've been speechless in all the years I've known you. So while George is gone, we could really talk about anything. So if you have any other questions, certainly, put him out there. Got to get him back on. All right. While George is trying to reconnect, oddly enough, this happened to me earlier today. Let me see if there are any questions yet. But
Am I back?
oh, you are. There you go.
All right, little quick fix on the fly. All right, so let me throw another thing out at you, and I want to hear. I know what I've heard. I'm going to throw it out. I want to see what you've heard. So apparently, for people who didn't realize this, there is something called an R&D tax credit. Have you heard about this before?
No.
So whether it's you're actually building something or you're creating a new process or you're creating new documentation or you're testing things out, right, to roll out to improve your business, there is a actual tax credit at the IRS level that can help discount your time, your costs to do R&D. And I've started to hear a lot more of this crop up for MSPs because aren't you constantly trying to evaluate things? You're constantly trying to improve things in your business. You're constantly looking to improve things for your customer's business. There's a whole process and time investment that goes into this. And now if you can follow the process and create the documentation, you can claim that as a tax credit.
Yeah, that's big. I mean, I would think that would help certainly offset some of the cost of having a resource working on that.
So like this could be just you documenting your own stuff out, creating process and workflow, or evaluating new technologies, lab testing them, creating the documentation so that you can roll that technology out to your customers. Or it could be you actually building and coding technology, right? So it covers all of those things. I kind of sounds based on what I've heard, and again, I'm not a tax guru or an accountant guru, but from everyone I've talked to who's looked at it, this could effectively and should effectively apply to almost every IP and managed services provider out there.
Yeah, I
So,
would definitely think that would be something they take advantage of.
so if
George,
you're, I mean, this is a tip, guys, right? Like you came here, we're giving it to you, free advice. Take it for what it's worth. Do the homework, though. I
I
mean,
think
you
next
actually can get
Thursday,
money back.
George, you need to have H&R Block on. Maybe you could give them some
I,
specifics on
I'm sure H&R Block couldn't tell us one direction or the other on this,
it.
but anyway, no, it's worth mentioning, right? Because the technology, like this should be something you create as a business blueprint of your company, right? If you don't do it, it's going to be the last thing that you do, and it's going to be a fire, job, and instead of doing that, like everything else in your business, you should be creating reoccurrence, right? You should be creating reproducible processes. You don't want to rely on just one person where everything bottlenecks, right? And so, back to Charlie's point, he's hearing the committee approach on technology. Somebody still probably is taking point on presenting the new stuff to the committee, or they're divvying out the process and they're all coming together. But I got to tell you right now, I mean, some of the new machine learning stuff that's coming out, is really exciting for the MSP space. And some of the new technology where it's stacked together, where instead of multiple different products, it's actually, kind of all communicating together, which I know has been the marketing
Right.
pitch in MSP space forever and probably nobody ever got there. I think it's finally starting to come to a point where like the customer experience is different.
Yeah, it has to get better, right?
Have you heard of anybody adopting like specifically from the customer perspective? Have you heard of MSPs rolling out mobile phone apps for their customers to communicate with them, or chat bots? Like we're starting to hear a lot of people concentrating in that customer part.
Yeah, I've heard some of those things. I mean, that's one of those, be careful what you wish for. The more the customers have access to, we even see, just support wise, the MSPs always talk about that, right? There's always those handful of customers that, I think one was talking about 2 weeks ago, and he was saying that as part of the agreement, they were signing a big client that they'd worked on for, probably 2 or 3 years. They tried to bring him on board, and the guy said, okay, well, I agree to all the T's and C's. I want your personal cell phone number or we won't sign it. And he's
Wow.
like, no, we're not doing that. He's like, you literally would walk away at this point. He's like, yeah, it's like, because, that's a single point of failure. I don't want to put myself in a position, because you know how it is. Let me go to the top and then I'll work my way down. And then the one time that guy's on a plane or on vacation with his family, or, his phone's down, all of a sudden you're not meeting an SLA, even though he's not following the process.
It
But
happens
yeah,
way too often. It really does. To the point where I was actually just on a call with a partner of mine earlier, like right before this call, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm thinking about porting my cell phone number." I'm like, "Really?" I was like, "How long do you have this cell phone number?" He's like, "Oh, since I started the business." And I'm like, "Let me guess, you want to stop getting phone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning?" He's like, "Yeah, I want like my text messages to go to my team. Like I don't want to start fielding. Like I want my phone calls to go to a ring group, right? Like I don't want just me answering those calls." I was like, "So you're gonna need a new cell phone number like from Verizon when you port this, right? Like you should probably talk to them before they just shut your service off." He's like, "Oh yeah, when I get that number, nobody will know that number. It'll just be my number." I'm like, "Okay, sure."
yeah,
Like that happens. That happens a lot. Um, kind of on the tail end here, 9 minutes left. But Charlie, we hear from the MSPs out there, and I'm sure You've heard it on your side. I've heard it from both sides. I've sat on both sides of that train track. Too many phone calls, too many emails, too much spam. Like it's almost like it's too much, too fast. Can't keep on top of it. And so now some people have taken the approach, I'm just not going to answer the phone at all. I'm never going to talk. I'm never going to call these people. I'll call you if I'm interested, but then you never have time, right?
That's
So
right.
if somebody comes to you and says, don't ever call me, I never want to hear a vendor call, what's your response to that?
Yeah, I think the big thing is making sure that, the team is being, respectful, right? And at least recognizing, taking some social cues, right? If we catch you at a bad time, I mean, I have this as well, where somebody will call you in the middle of dinner and, just taking some social cues there. I also think that, making sure that, it's not a sales pitch. They don't want to be sold to. So if you do get them and you do piss them off enough, and we've always, we've all had that, right? So anybody that says that they didn't probably isn't in sales in the industry. But I would, my real approach, if somebody's that heated and they say, don't ever call me again, is just be respectful. Tell them that, if there's anything we can do moving forward, let us know. Make sure that they're off the spam list, so that and honestly, at Axcient, we have an approach not to do that. It's hard enough as it is. So as it's getting through some of that noise. Even if they do take it, you always wind up in some filter anyhow. So doing that and really leveraging the social platforms to get our message out there to those folks.
Okay,
So making sure, I mean, one of the things that, our product team even worked on, I had a conversation with them and I said, we send out release notes every time that we have a new version. I said, but who reads them? Said, so we're going to be creating videos moving forward that are, 2 minutes or less. And we're just going to tell you what it is. And, I believe, just the way I learned, that they probably would, we'll see more people taking that up and making it a bit easier to just find out what's going on.
Content creation is king. There's no question about that. And there's probably a little bit of truth to the more information that's available about your solution, the more people will do that homework before they actually engage anyway. So
Oh yeah, we're finding that.
Yeah. I mean, that applies to the MSPs too, right? If you create educational content, you create, kind of business related content, not just buy, and you send that out to the world on a regular basis, you're going to find out that actually comes back to you exponentially in a positive way. So
no, agreed. I mean, if you look at where we are today, where we, and it's getting back online, right? But our storefront as vendors were the trade shows.
Yep.
Going to an event, we popped up a booth. That was our storefront. We got to see the people that walk by. Now, when it's all, a bit hidden, right? And it's all on the internet, everyone's, like you said, they're doing the homework first. So, you got to figure out, and this is, I think, an MSP issue as well, is, that's your storefront, that's your virtual storefront. So making sure that you're serving up that content and it's constantly evolving and changing, so that they don't walk past the store.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And consistently, right? If you don't put stuff out on a consistent basis and you're just doing it every, intermittently, I think the message isn't going to get across. Not just from you researching technology coming to you, but you also communicating with your prospective customers as well. So it's, we can all learn from each other, right? I think that, video is very hot right now. So if you haven't adopted that in your business, start doing that. Even if you don't like being in front of the camera as the guy who's signing the checks, find somebody in your team that's willing to do it and spend 3-4 hours a week. I know it sounds crazy. Why am I going to spend 3-4 hours a week cutting up video? Because it's got to help you.
No, that's exactly right.
And if you do that, I think you're going to find out it won't even take 6 months. I think in 90 days, 120 days, you'll start to see customers saying, hey, watch that video. It's really cool.
Yeah,
I want to learn more about that.
exactly.
Now all of a sudden you have a whole conversation string that before you were just dying to get into but couldn't, and now they're coming to you. So take a
No,
couple of
that's right.
take a couple of the cues, right? From, like I said, the cable TV guy saying press here to press OK, or the how the cell phone companies do stuff, how the emerging vendors and technologies are doing stuff. You can take some of those tactics and do them too.
Yep, exactly. I
100%.
agree.
100%. Charlie, where are we going to find you or the Axcient team anywhere coming up shortly? I mean, I know things are starting to
I, I will be at Robin's boot camp next week.
in
So
Orlando. Yeah.
definitely stop by the booth if anybody's there, and looking forward to it. I don't know if I know how to do this again. So I'm getting some training from our awesome marketing team today on how to actually, conduct yourself at the booth and what are things we should be doing and not doing. And but yeah, definitely looking forward to getting back on the road.
That's fantastic. That's exciting. The world has started to finally look more like 2019 again.
Yeah,
That is a positive thing. Well,
exactly.
if anybody's in Orlando next week, I would say stop by, check out the event, see if Charlie and team is around. If not, looks like the second half of the year, right? Start, looks like it's really starting to open up. So I'm sure we're going to see you guys out on the road. But listen, guys, if you're not going to events to learn from forget the trade show booth for a second. I know Charlie's cringing. Forget the trade show booth for a second. Just talk to the people in the industry that are doing what you're doing. And you're going to start to find a lot of new things that are happening. If you're not doing that in person, and I hope that you are, figure out a way to do it on a regular basis virtually. But I think that's the best thing for you, right? Not just keep up with the news, but also talk to people in the sandbox, I call it, that are doing what you do. That's, you're either going to learn the hard way or you're going to learn from somebody else. Sometimes it's
That's
better
right.
to learn from somebody else. Charlie, I really appreciate you for jumping on board. If you haven't checked out Axcient, go to axcient.com, or you can find Charlie on all the social platforms. I'm sure you can send him a LinkedIn message and he'll reply. Or Charlie, is there any other way you would want people to reach out to you?
Yeah, I think that's the best way. I mean, if they want, they can reach me at Tomeo, Tomeo at Axcient.com.
Awesome. Well, there you go. He just gave you basically a cell phone number, but his email address.
Yeah.
So there you go. Guys, watch this video was entirely recorded. You can go back and hear us just putting our thoughts out into the interweb here at mspinitiative.com under the sessions tab. And there was a couple other sessions we've had with Charlie and team prior that are some good things to learn up on. So you can watch all of those sessions online under mspinitiative.com/sessions. Remember, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1:00 Eastern time. We'll continue doing this online, and definitely keep out for future events. And the Channel Strong Tour is coming to the Midwest at the end of this month. If you happen to be in any one of those cities, we'd love to see you. Again, Channel Strong Tour on the MSP Initiative website. You'll see all of those dates and stops. Charlie, catch you on the flip side, my friend, and have a great day.
Thanks, George.
You got it.
Take care.